Sometimes when you're fastening two boards together, you use screws to do it. Today I'm going to show you how to make those screw holes disappear. I'm going to take my plug cutter over here to my drill press. Cool old Delta drill press. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to cut straight down into our object piece. So plug cutter and the chuck on our drill. We're going to chuck that up in there. We're going to tighten it up before we let go of it though next time. Yes, it's a Friday morning. There, we've got that in place. We're going to take our chuck key off of here. Make sure we pull this out before we turn the drill on. This one, fortunately, is spring-loaded. Old days, they didn't have spring-loaded on them, so guys would forget and leave that in there. When they started the drill up, this would go flying across the room somewhere and can kind of hurt people. And when it comes to storing this, always right there. It's always right there on my drill press, so I never lose it, never have to worry about going and run off to try to find one. So this plug cutter is going to cut us a plug, and I'm going to use a contrasting color walnut here. I'm going to put this into a piece of maple just so you'll see what it does and what the process is. So I think this will go a lot quicker if I plug it in. So let's do this. Let's get that plugged in and ready to roll. And we're going to fire this up, and I'm going to cut just a handful of these just so I can show you how it works. I'm going to show you a little bit more about this plug cutter here in just a minute. Now the cool thing about this particular drill press is it has a foot activated headpiece on it. So it's all connected here with my foot feet. I can hold my piece in both hands. Operate the head with the foot feeding. That'll be enough for our illustration. What this did now is it cut these small little barrels into that piece of walnut. And this has basically a spring-loaded center punch to it. So that keeps it lined up as it's going down into that hole. And then it literally drills the area around there by keeping the center of it intact. So that centerpiece will actually end up being the plug that we're going to use to fill the hole. Let's step over here back to the bench. And let's go like this. We're going to drill through this piece and we're going to make a T intersection there. The reason we're going to use this illustration because literally last week I made a set of shelves for a good friend of mine, and I wanted to put screws into the ends of it to hold the shelves together in one section of it. So let's go there.
Why are you drawing?
I'm drawing a line straight across just so I end up having them lined up real nice when they're going into our piece here. Let me grab our battery drill. And I'm going to go about that far in from that side. I'm going to drill holes in there. This is a 3/8 inch drill bit. This is a 3/8 inch plug cutter. They have to match up. We're going to go down in there about 1/4 inch, maybe a little more. And we're going to do another one right on that same line. About 1/4 inch there. And let me grab 2 little screws to put in there. And we'll talk about it while I'm walking over here to get a couple of them. There we go. Now, when I go to line this up, and I go to put my screws in there, let's set this down like this and get those started to make it a little easier.
Now I saw that there was like a guide hole in there.
Yeah, the center of this, what's called a brad point bit, has that nice little point on the end to help make sure that your piece runs down, your hole runs nice and down and straight in there. I'm going to set this up there, and I'm just going to hold it in place while I screw it together. And again, this is all just illustrations on how plug cutters work. Not exactly what I wanted to have happen there, but it's okay. There. We'll get this straight across there by putting our square on it. Right on the money. I'm going to run that screw in there. So there, now our piece is attached. Now, the screw part of this becomes something that we want to hide. So what I'll do is I'll take a little screwdriver, and the grain is running this way with our board. So I want to take the screw and kind of pry across that grain. Pop this little plug up just like that. They pop right on out of there. When I'm making them, if I've got 2 holes to fill, I'll usually do 3 or 4 of the plugs to make sure if one of them doesn't work, doesn't cooperate, I can still get a spare to put in there. And then we'll run a little glue on them. And we don't need a whole lot of glue, but we're going to get a little on there just to make sure they fill that hole. And they stay in there. Let's get our little slap wrench. Now, you'll see from the point on this cutter that there's a point right there. There's a little dimple in that plug. That part always goes down into the hole because ultimately these are just slightly tapered. So as it goes into that hole, it's going to compress a little bit. And if this were the same color versus a contrasting color, I'd make sure the grain on this was aligned with the grain on the board. But I did walnut purposely so there'll be a contrast so you can see the contrast. Drive that in there just like that, and you'll hear it bottom out. The sound of the tapping changes. Hear that change? Makes a difference. And so those are in there, and obviously we would take a few minutes and let our glue dry. Now we got to make this flush and have it pretty much go away.
While it's drying, Tim, will you talk about some of your favorite methods of fastening for high-end woodworking products?
High-end woodworking project fastening stuff together. Obviously, I typically like to have my fastening means not visible. Sometimes that's a dado in a piece. Sometimes it's a glue joint with biscuits in it. Sometimes it's a glue joint with dominoes in it. Sometimes it's mortise and tenon. Sometimes it's rabbets and all. It just depends on what the application is. Here's a good example. Let's turn around over here quick and look at the example we have right here on this bench. This is just a small seating bench, and what I did here is I attached the aprons to the legs with a biscuit, and then I put Kreg screws in there, which are covered up by our cross member over here. So all of these corners have Kreg screws as a mechanical fastener and biscuits to help with the alignment, and then they're glued. And then, being this is going to be underneath a seat bench and not visible, I took corner braces and I screwed a corner brace into each side of each of the apron sides, and then one down through the center of the leg. Just makes it that much more stable. Not concerned about the visibility from this perspective because it's going to be covered. But if you look at the sides and the ends where that attachment of the apron goes to the leg, you never see any of the attachment. It's all invisible. It's all hidden inside, which is kind of what you want for fine woodworking. You want stability, you want ease of application, and you want invisibility. So with this, we're going to say we fast forwarded it enough time for that to dry. What I like to do is take my flush cut pull saw, real flexible little saw with no set in the teeth, and I can go in here And I can just shave that off. These always cut on the pull stroke. And why I'm doing it this way versus this way is I don't want my hand being downstream of that cutter at all, because when that cuts through, if this continues to go on and your skin is in the way, it's going to slice it off big time. These things really cut well on that pull stroke like that. Right there. Almost perfectly flush and no saw marks anywhere on it, because this has no set in the teeth. Real fine. Just pulls it off, and you run your finger over that, you can barely feel it. Another way to do it that works equally as well is, we'll set that there, a low angle block plane, and just literally plane that excess down and off of there. I think it's kind of neat. Look at the little pieces that are coming off of there. Just little slices. There, we're almost perfect there. Nice, perfectly flat. Let's give this side just a little bit of a shot. Okay, so now I've gone over and I've grabbed my random orbit disc sander. Just as the last thing I like to do is just to sand things off, just to make sure they're perfectly flat and perfectly smooth. But there we go. Nice and perfectly flat. And as I said, if I were doing this and I did not want those to be visible, I'd have made them out of maple, much like the rest of it is. I did them out of walnut, so you can see the contrast. A great way to do it. And sometimes I've done pieces where I wanted those to be visible as an accent on the piece. I'll draw my line down there, I'll cut them all in a nice row and put a contrasting color in there. And it just makes it for a pretty accent if you want it to be, a pretty way to hide your screw connections. If you don't want to have it visible, put similar wood in there, make them out of the same piece you made the piece out of, and away you go.
So what are the tools you used today?
Well, let's see. We used our plug cutter here. We used our 3/8 brad point bit there. We used our square to get our holes in a line just to make it look nice. We used our little black slap wrench to knock them into place when we wanted them. We did our low angle block plane to get it nice and smooth. We took our flush cut pull saw to get it nice and flat. We used good old everyday tight bond to hold it in place. Our drill driver, our impact driver, and our screwdriver to bust them loose. All that stuff off the back wall here. Pretty cool, huh? It's amazing how many different tools you can apply to a particular project just to accomplish a really nice end result. And right there we have it. That's a plug cutter in its best application. Make that screw going into the side of your board to give it a mechanical fastening, make it disappear. Questions, comments, leave them down below. How do you hide your joints?